I never thought my own family would betray me on Christmas morning.
The night was drenched in rain, a heavy, unrelenting downpour that soaked the narrow alley and turned it into a small river. Thunder rumbled overhead, echoing off brick walls that leaned in close, shadows dancing across graffiti-streaked surfaces. Every drop of water on the pavement reflected the dim glow of a single, flickering streetlight, painting the world in streaks of silver and gray. Michael and his daughter Emily walked cautiously, umbrellas barely shielding them from the storm. Emily's small hand clutched his tightly, her eyes wide as she splashed through the puddles. The night was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the rhythmic patter of rain. But then came the sudden chilling sound, a muffled scream, sharp and urgent. From the shadowed end of the alley, a young woman was struggling, pinned by two men whose intentions were unmistakable. The air thickened with tension, the raindrops now seeming to fall in slow motion as Michael's instincts kicked in. Without a moment's hesitation, he moved. Years of training, honed reflexes, and a life long buried under domestic calm surged through him. He grabbed the nearest attacker, twisting and flipping him to the wet pavement. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The sound of fists hitting, concrete, and the woman's desperate cries mixed with the roar of the rain. Michael's other hand swept toward the second assailant, parrying a swing, landing a precise blow that left the man dazed. The young woman stumbled free, tears mingling with rain, eyes wide as she took her first free breaths. Michael shielded her, umbrella tilted to cover them both, rain soaking through his jacket, hair plastered to his forehead. Emily watched, frozen, yet her heart swelled with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Dad, you're amazing," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. A brief flashback. Michael's fingers brushed the small broken pen in his pocket, glinting under the streetlight, a silent reminder of a past he rarely spoke of, a life in elite security, of battles fought in shadows, of promises made to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Passers-by, umbrellas in hand, had begun filming the scene. The sound of camera shutters and muffled voices mixed with the storm, capturing Michael's courage. A few shouted encouragement, others murmured in awe. Within minutes, someone uploaded the video online, a digital spark ready to ignite. Michael finally guided the young woman to safety at the end of the alley. Away from the danger, she clutched his arm, breathing heavily, gratitude and relief painting her soaked face. Emily stayed close, eyes wide but trusting, still absorbing the gravity of what she had just witnessed. For Michael, the alley was more than a random act of violence. It was a reminder. The world outside might see him as an ordinary man, but his instincts, his courage, his skill, they were never ordinary. And tonight, that hidden life had spoken loudly, whether he wanted it to or not. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, and the faint click of a camera shutter echoed. The rain poured on, relentless, as if the storm itself was applauding the bravery that had just unfolded in a quiet, forgotten alley. The next morning, a visitor appears at Michael's door, someone who seems to know far too much. Who is she, and why has she come? Michael sat in his dimly lit apartment, rain drumming steadily against the windows, the city lights casting fleeting reflections on the wet streets below. Emily slept peacefully, her soft breathing a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in the digital world. Michael's phone had become a relentless source of tension, buzzing with notifications, each one a ripple of his sudden, unintended fame. The alley fight video, once a fleeting moment of instinctive courage, had exploded across social media, trending worldwide in a matter of hours. Comments poured in, some praising him as a hero with awe and admiration, others questioning his motives, twisting his actions into ridicule, while viral memes turned the life-and-death struggle into fleeting humor, robbing the moment of its seriousness. Each notification, each tag, each share made Michael feel the careful anonymity he had cultivated, for years slipping through his fingers, exposing him to a world he had tried to leave behind. He scrolled through the reactions, feeling a mix of disbelief, pride, and a creeping anxiety that came from knowing his past. As an elite security agent was now just a layer, beneath the public's perception, invisible yet dangerously close to surfacing. Calls began flooding in, reporters, unknown numbers, and curious strangers who wanted interviews, explanations, or just a glimpse into the life of the mystery hero. Michael's heart raced as he silenced some calls and ignored others, but he knew it was futile. The storm had arrived, and it was relentless. Then, amid the chaos, a call broke through with a voice that carried authority, emotion, and a sense of personal urgency, one that immediately commanded his attention. Isabella Lane, a woman whose name Michael vaguely recognized, but whose voice struck a chord deep within him, introduced herself as someone with a deeply personal connection to the young woman he had saved. As she spoke, revealing that the incident was far more than a random street attack and that the woman was her sister, Michael felt a wave of past memories and instincts flood back, the split-second decisions, the silent calculations of threat and protection, the training that had once defined him as a man who lived in shadows, never letting anyone glimpse the world behind his calm demeanor. His eyes fell to the broken pen in his pocket, a small, seemingly insignificant object that had long been his only tangible connection to the life he had left behind, now suddenly charged with meaning, a symbol that the past and present were colliding in ways he could no longer ignore. Anxiety mingled with pride as he thought of Emily, asleep and oblivious to the digital storm and the resurfacing of her father's concealed life. Every thought of her safety made the calls, notifications, and viral reactions feel heavier, more urgent. Michael realized that this was not just the world's curiosity. This was a test, a challenge to balance the fragile peace of his present domestic life with the chaotic echoes of a past that demanded recognition, action, and responsibility. He leaned back, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over him like the rain outside, and took a deep breath, knowing that the knock at the door, the caller on the line, or the next viral mention could change everything. Isabella's words had hinted at stakes he could not ignore. The woman he saved was family to someone powerful, someone who could affect not only his future but the safety and happiness of Emily, the life he had fought so hard to protect. Each second stretched as he processed the magnitude of exposure, the sudden loss of anonymity, the scrutiny of millions, and the ripple effects that could follow. Michael's mind raced through scenarios, protection strategies, and worst-case outcomes, each memory of his elite security training mingling with paternal instincts, forging a complex tension between the man he had been and the father he had become. The realization that a single act of courage, performed without thought or expectation, had now opened the door to both admiration and potential. Danger weighed heavily upon him. Just then, a sharp knock on the door echoed through the apartment, cutting through the storm of digital chaos, the patter of rain, and the whirlpool of his racing thoughts. Michael's hand instinctively reached for the broken pen in his pocket, the familiar touch grounding him, reminding him that he had faced threats before and survived, that his instincts were still alive even in this new, exposed world. The air was thick with tension, the storm outside a mirror to the storm inside, and as he approached the door, heart pounding, he realized that opening it would bridge the gap between past and present, anonymity and exposure, safety and risk. Who exactly was standing on the other side? Was it Isabella seeking answers, help, or perhaps something more urgent? Or someone else entirely drawn by the viral video, sensing an opportunity to manipulate, threaten, or recruit? Michael's mind flashed with images of his past missions, his silent guardianship, and the sacrifices that had defined him, contrasting sharply with Emily's innocent sleep, the normal life he had fought to build, and the precarious balance now at stake. Every second felt amplified, the knock, the rain, the distant city sounds, the buzzing phone, the endless social media comments, all forming a symphony of tension that demanded a decision: to open the door and confront the consequences of heroism, or to hide, delaying the inevitable clash between past and present. Michael inhaled slowly, letting the cold, wet air fill his lungs, centering himself in the calm that only he could summon amidst chaos. He knew that once the door opened, the trajectory of his life, and Emily's, would change irrevocably. His pulse steadied, determination hardened, and he prepared for the moment that would mark the true beginning of a chain reaction far beyond a simple alley rescue, a moment that would expose secrets, challenge loyalties, and test the strength of his identity as both protector and father. With a final glance toward Emily's peaceful form, Michael reached for the door handle, aware that the world outside had already begun watching, and that nothing would ever be the same again. The sleek black SUV rolled to a quiet stop outside Michael's building, its engine purring softly in the otherwise still morning, but tension radiated through the air like electricity before a storm. Rain had finally subsided, leaving the streets glistening and the city waking slowly, oblivious to the storm about to enter Michael's life. The knock on his door was firm, insistent, carrying a weight that made him instinctively glance at the broken pen in his pocket, a lifeline to the life he had long tried to bury, now suddenly a talisman of inevitable confrontation. Michael opened the door to reveal a woman of commanding presence, Isabella Lane, whose poised demeanor belied the emotion flickering in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude, concern, and a barely restrained urgency. She was a striking figure, dressed in understated elegance. But Michael immediately sensed that her strength was not merely in appearance or status. It radiated from experience, from someone used to taking charge in both boardrooms and crises alike. Isabella wasted no time with pleasantries, her voice steady but carrying a tremor of intensity as she revealed the truth. The woman Michael had saved in the alley, whose life he had risked instinctively, was her sister, Sophie, someone she had loved and protected her entire life. The words struck Michael like a physical force, a shockwave of recognition and disbelief. His mind raced, images of past missions flashing unbidden, high-stakes protection operations, split-second decisions under pressure, nights spent in vigilance while the world slept, sacrifices made to keep innocent lives safe, all now colliding with the immediate reality of this revelation. He felt a surge of conflicting emotions, pride at knowing he had protected someone of immeasurable value, anxiety at the implications of exposure, and a pang of regret that life had moved on while his past had remained locked away, secret and unacknowledged. Isabella continued, recounting how she had lived with the fear, the tension, and the gratitude for a shadowy figure she never truly knew, someone who had been there when it mattered most, unseen but deeply impactful. Her voice softened as she shared memories of Sophie's vulnerability, of moments that could have ended in tragedy if not for the intervention of someone brave enough to step into danger without hesitation. Michael's chest tightened as he listened, realizing the depth of connection he had, unknowingly maintained through acts of protection, a bond unseen by the outside world but etched permanently in the lives he had safeguarded. Emily stirred in her sleep, and Michael glanced at her, the innocence of her dreams, juxtaposed sharply against the weight of history and responsibility, now pressing on his shoulders. Isabella's eyes met his, searching for reassurance, understanding, and perhaps a hint of the man she believed he still was, beneath the fatherly guise he had adopted. He struggled to find words, the intensity of emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Gratitude, humility, a quiet pride in what he had done, and a sudden awareness that his carefully constructed life of normalcy was now under scrutiny, vulnerable to forces he could neither fully predict nor control. Isabella extended a hand, a gesture of trust, of plea, asking him to step back into a role he had long abandoned, not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was needed, because someone's life, someone deeply cherished, had depended on him. Michael felt the familiar pull of duty, the old instincts resurfacing, muscles tensing and mind analyzing scenarios, balancing protection, strategies with the knowledge that Emily's safety and stability were paramount. The broken pen pressed against his chest, a tactile reminder of the life he had led before, of the missions, the sacrifices, the secrecy, all converging with the present moment. He remembered watching over Isabella and Sophie as children, their laughter, their vulnerability, and the solemn promise he had made silently to himself to always be there, even when unseen, even when the world would never know. Now, years later, the promise demanded acknowledgement, action, and presence. Isabella's words cut through the storm of his thoughts. She was not asking lightly. This was urgent, personal, and unavoidable. The air was thick with unspoken understanding, of risks, of consequences, of the balance between heroism and domestic life, between visibility and anonymity. Michael knew that the choice before him was more than a professional call it, was a moral imperative, an emotional reckoning, and a deeply personal challenge. Could he once again step into danger, embrace a life that required vigilance and sacrifice, and still remain the father Emily needed, the protector she deserved? The weight of responsibility was heavy, but the fire of his protective instincts, dormant yet unextinguished, flared to life. Isabella's presence, the vulnerability of Sophie, the innocent sleep of Emily, all combined to form a crucible of emotional intensity, demanding clarity, courage, and decisive action. Michael's gaze fell to the broken pen, the tiny eagle engraving a symbol of his past, a silent witness to the life he had led and the choices he would have to make. He inhaled deeply, feeling the gravity of history, duty, and love converge. The decision loomed: step back into the shadows, reclaim a part of himself long suppressed, and protect those who depended on him, or retreat, prioritizing safety and the semblance of normalcy, risking regret, guilt, and the lives of those he loved most. Isabella waited, a steady presence amid the storm of tension, conveying both the trust she placed in him and the urgency of the need she had revealed. Michael's heartbeat echoed in his ears, a rhythm of anticipation, reflection, and determination. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes, the collective judgment of a world beginning to notice. Yet the true stakes were intimate, deeply human, and pressing. He realized that heroism was rarely a choice of comfort. It was a demand of courage, a call to stand when it mattered most, often unseen, sometimes unrecognized, but always impactful. His past and present, his roles as father and protector, as hidden guardian and visible hero, converged in this single tense moment. With Emily's peaceful face in his periphery, Isabella's unwavering gaze before him, and Sophie's life hanging delicately in the balance, Michael made a quiet internal vow. He would rise to the challenge, not for fame, not for recognition, but because it was right, because the bonds of trust, love, and responsibility demanded it, and because the man he had been could never ignore the call of duty. When it arrived at his doorstep, the morning sunlight glinted off the black SUV outside, painting the room in a golden hue of possibility and impending confrontation, signaling the beginning of a journey that would test his skills, heart and soul, in ways both familiar and frightening. A journey where past heroism would collide with present devotion, shaping the man Michael was destined to be. The morning air felt heavier than usual as Michael stepped outside with Isabella. Every sound amplified: the distant hum of traffic, the soft rustle of leaves, the faint echo of a barking dog somewhere down the street, as if the world were bracing for something it sensed but could not see. And Michael, more than anyone, understood that feeling all too well. The black SUV door closed behind him with a solid thud, a sound that pulled him back into memories of missions, where every decision was irreversible, every step a calculated move that could lead to salvation or catastrophe. Isabella sat beside him in silence for a moment, her fingers clasped tightly, the tremble in her hands betraying the strength she tried to project. And Michael watched her with a mix of empathy and tension, realizing that the battlefield she was walking into now was unlike the corporate wars she was used to. It was the kind of conflict where shadows held knives, where alliances shifted like quicksand, and where vulnerability could cost lives. The car began moving, gliding through the city streets, and Isabella spoke, her voice low, fragile yet laced with determination, as she explained the truth that had remained buried. Sophie had been receiving threats long before the attack. Michael stopped. Messages that hinted at something far larger than a random street assault, something rooted in secrets their family had never fully escaped. She revealed fragments of a past Michael knew too well: boardroom power struggles, inherited enemies, high-profile contracts tied to dangerous individuals, and a rival whose name alone made Michael's pulse quicken. Victor Hale, a man Michael had dealt with before, a ruthless strategist who operated in the murky space between legal power and criminal influence. A man who believed fear was currency and control was oxygen. A man who once came close to devastating the very family Michael had sworn to protect. As Isabella spoke, the cityscape blurred past the tinted windows. But Michael wasn't seeing the streets anymore. He was seeing memories of surveillance rooms, glowing with screens, anonymous intel files stamped with red warnings, intercepted threats that mentioned the Lane family, and strategies crafted in the dark to keep two young sisters safe. The realization hit Michael with the weight of a tidal wave. The attack on Sophie wasn't random, wasn't opportunistic. It was a message, a warning, a prelude to something much more sinister. His chest tightened as the SUV turned toward a secure underground facility beneath one of the Lane Corporation buildings, the kind of place built not for business but for crisis, equipped with reinforced steel doors, biometric scanners, and the quiet hum of emergency power systems designed for the worst-case scenarios. Isabella led him inside, past security personnel who recognized her but shot curious glances at Michael, their eyes silently asking who he was and why. Isabella Lane would personally escort him into the most restricted area of their infrastructure. Inside the war room, the lights dimmed automatically, flickering to life around a massive digital table displaying maps, Data streams, intercepted messages, and a blurry surveillance screenshot of a masked man, Sophie's attacker. Michael's stomach twisted. He recognized the posture, the movement, the cold efficiency. This wasn't some street thug. This was a trained operative. Someone operating under orders. Isabella placed a trembling hand on the table, zooming into a decrypted message recovered from Sophie's phone, a message that read only 3 words. "You're not safe." Michael felt a familiar fire ignite within him. Anger, protective instinct, the surge of focus that came when danger became personal. He analyzed the data quickly, his mind shifting into the tactical mode he hadn't used in years, connecting dots others wouldn't even see. He explained patterns, predicted enemy movements, broke down threat probabilities, and outlined ways Victor could escalate his attacks. Isabella watched him, astonished, as if witnessing a ghost return to life, the protector she had once known only as a shadow now standing before her with deadly clarity. But even as Michael worked, even as his instincts sharpened and his mind raced, his thoughts kept circling back to Emily, the little girl, still sleeping peacefully at home, unaware that her father was being pulled into a war that could touch her life if he made even a single mistake. The room suddenly felt colder as the screens flashed with a new alert. Footage taken minutes before Michael rescued Sophie. The attacker had been trailing her for hours. This wasn't impulsive. It was orchestrated. And then the footage shifted, showing something that made Isabella gasp, a second figure emerging from the shadows, watching the attack unfold. Not participating, but observing, recording. Michael stepped closer, heart pounding harder with each slow second of the video. The second figure wore a long coat, face hidden under the brim of a hat, posture too calm, too controlled. Whoever it was, they weren't surprised when Michael intervened. They looked directly into the camera as if expecting someone to watch this later. A message within a message, a taunt, a challenge. Isabella's voice broke through the silence, barely above a whisper as she asked Michael the question she feared most. Why does he want her? What does Victor gain from hurting Sophie? Michael inhaled slowly, feeling the crushing weight of the answer forming in his chest, a truth he had never wanted to reveal because of the consequences it carried. Sophie was not simply a victim, she was leverage. Victor Hale wasn't after one life. He was after control of the entire Lane empire, and Sophie, gentle, trusting, unaware of the secrets surrounding her, was the easiest pressure point. Isabella's knees weakened as she processed this, but Michael steadied her. His voice steady, controlled, reassuring even in the midst of rising tension, telling her that this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the fight, and he would not let Victor win. The screens continued to flicker with data. Shadows danced across the walls, and the atmosphere vibrated with the weight of an unseen war now brought to light. Michael stood tall, the protector awakened fully, his past no longer a secret but a weapon, and as he stared at the masked attacker on the screen, he felt a single, unbreakable promise form in his heart. He would end this threat, protect the Lane sisters, and keep Emily safe, no matter what darkness he had to walk back into. The war room's cold light clung to Michael's skin long after he stepped outside, as though the shadows of his past refused to let go, following him through the underground corridor and into the elevator as it rose, toward the surface with a low, mechanical hum that felt more like a countdown than a ride, a reminder that he had only, moments before this hidden conflict, spilled violently into the world above. When the elevator doors opened, Isabella walked beside him in shaken silence, each step echoing with the weight of the revelation they had just faced. Sophie was not merely attacked. She was targeted, studied, hunted with intent, and somewhere in the city a masked figure and a second watcher were preparing their next move. Michael felt the pressure in his chest growing heavier, the familiar tightness that always came before a tactical storm. And yet, beneath that steel layer of instinct, a softer fear trembled through him. Emily. He imagined her tiny hands curled around her toy bunny, imagined her laughter, imagined her trusting eyes, looking up at him, eyes that had no idea her father was being dragged back into a world where monsters didn't hide under beds. They hid behind power, behind threats, behind masks that smiled politely before striking. As Michael exited the building, the sun struggled through the clouds, casting streaks of pale light across the pavement, but even daylight felt dim, muted, as if the sky itself sensed the danger tightening around them. Isabella's phone buzzed sharply, and Michael saw her expression freeze. Another message. When she opened it, her breath caught. A photo, Sophie, taken from behind a cafe window, time-stamped only 10 minutes earlier. She was rereading a book, unaware she was being watched again. Michael snatched the phone gently but urgently, eyes narrowing as he scanned every pixel of the photo, the angle, the distance, the window reflection, the faint silhouette behind the camera, too blurry to identify, but deliberate enough to taunt. Their enemy wasn't hiding. He was announcing himself. Michael's jaw tightened. This wasn't surveillance anymore. It was provocation. A trap. A psychological chokehold designed to force fear into Sophie before the real attack began. Isabella's hands trembled so violently she dropped her phone, and Michael steadied her with a calm firmness, telling her in the low, unwavering tone he used in past crises that she needed to hold on, to breathe, because panic was exactly what Victor Hale wanted. Panic fractured judgment. Panic created openings. Panic killed. With quick precision, Michael called Sophie, disguising the urgency in his voice as he asked her casual, everyday questions: where she was, whether she had eaten, whether she needed anything. Sophie answered softly, relaxed, unaware of the storm gathering around her. She mentioned she would stay at the cafe another hour to finish her tea. That single sentence sent a cold spike through Michael's spine. An hour was too long, too vulnerable, too perfectly timed for an ambush. He told her gently to head straight home instead, making up a small excuse about Emily wanting to show her a new drawing. As soon as the call ended, Michael moved, fast, every fiber of his training snapping into place. Like a loaded weapon, he instructed Isabella to stay inside the building's secure floor, promising her he would bring Sophie home safely. But Isabella grabbed his arm, her voice cracking with a fear she could no longer contain as she whispered, "What if they already have her marked? What if we're too late?" Michael met her eyes with a steady, quiet intensity, the kind of look forged in years of facing death and defying it, and said, "If they want a war, they chose the wrong man to provoke." He left before she could argue. Outside, the world spun with its normal rhythm, cars passing, children laughing, shop doors opening and closing, but Michael saw only patterns. Threats, angles of attack, exit points, blind spots, escape routes. Every face became a potential decoy. Every moving car became a possible surveillance unit, and somewhere among those innocently walking strangers was the predator Victor. Hale had unleashed. Michael reached the cafe in minutes, heart pounding not with fear for himself, but with an urgency that bordered on violent protectiveness. As he approached the window, he saw Sophie through the glass, reading peacefully, unaware that her life balanced on a knife's edge. But Michael also saw something else. A man sitting 2 tables behind her, posture too relaxed, eyes too sharp, not reading, not typing, not drinking, only watching. And he wasn't alone. Another figure leaned casually near the entrance, pretending to check his phone but glancing at Sophie with too much frequency. A 2-man team, well-coordinated, professional, waiting for orders, waiting for Sophie to stand up and walk outside alone. Michael stepped inside, his presence calm, but his senses stretched razor-thin, analyzing the spacing, the distance between Sophie and the exit, the possible choke points if they tried to grab her, the reaction time he would need to intervene before a single scream left her throat. He greeted Sophie with a warm smile that masked the storm raging behind his eyes, telling her Emily was eager to see her and they needed to leave immediately. Sophie smiled sweetly and began packing her things. That moment, the simple act of her gathering her bag, felt like the longest second of Michael's life, because he saw it happen. The watcher near the entrance shifted slightly, touching his ear. A signal. The man behind Sophie stood up, slow, controlled, ready to move. Michael's blood turned to ice. The trap had sprung, and the enemy believed they had the advantage. They didn't. Michael moved before the first man could take a step, placing his arm around Sophie in a protective, natural motion, leaning close as if speaking to her while shielding her from every angle. His voice was soft, but his words were steel. "Do not panic. Follow my lead, now." Sophie didn't fully understand, but she trusted him instantly, her breathing tightening as she sensed danger she could not yet see. In the corners of the cafe, shadows thickened. The operatives adjusted positions, and Michael realized something chilling. This wasn't an abduction attempt. It was a test. Victor was measuring Michael's response time, his capabilities, his instincts. He wanted to see if the old guardian inside him was still alive, Michael tightened his grip on Sophie and guided her toward the back exit. Every movement fluid, silent, deliberate, and as the operatives began closing in, Michael's heart hardened with a single truth. Victor Hale wasn't just after power. He was after Michael himself. And now, the real game had begun. The moment Michael and Sophie slipped out through the narrow cafe back exit, the world outside slammed into them with chaotic intensity, cars honking, footsteps echoing, conversations overlapping. Yet none of it masked the icy awareness crawling up. Michael's spine as he guided Sophie to the side alley, keeping her close, scanning every angle for pursuit. He knew the operatives wouldn't attack openly. Not here, not now. But their silence didn't mean retreat. It meant calculation. As they reached the car Isabella had sent, Michael quickly secured Sophie inside, instructing the driver to take her straight home without stopping, then shut the door with a final glance that silently promised her she was safe. Only when the car pulled away did he exhale the breath he had been holding. But before he could process the near attack, before he could even take a step away from the curb, his phone exploded with notifications, hundreds of them, lighting up his screen in a rapid-fire blur. Headlines, clips, thread tags, viral posts. Mystery man rescues woman in alley goes viral again. Who is this real-life guardian? Is this the same man seen protecting a CEO's family years ago? His face, from the alley, captured in crisp HD by someone he hadn't even noticed. Another video showed him guiding Sophie out of the cafe earlier, taken by a bystander who thought he was a celebrity or part of some action movie shoot. Someone else posted edited clips, comparing his alley fight stance to archived footage from an old Lane Industries security leak, placing him side by side like some kind of internet legend. What terrified Michael was not the fame, not the attention, not the comments calling him Guardian Dad or the silent protector, but the realization that his anonymity, the shield that kept Emily safe for years, was collapsing at terrifying speed. Dozens of reporters camped outside his apartment already. Photos of his building spread across trending pages. A shaky clip of Emily playing outside months ago resurfaced because someone recognized his face. They captioned it, "Hero's daughter spotted." The world wasn't just watching. The world was digging. As Michael walked briskly down the street, his hood pulled low, he read the comments flooding every platform. Speculation about his past, conspiracy theories linking him to covert missions, others claiming he had government ties or was part of a secret organization. Some praised him with near worship. Others mocked him, calling him wannabe action hero, suggesting the alley fight was staged for clout. But among the chaos, one message cut deeper than the rest. It was sent directly to his private account, one he had never shared publicly. A single line, "You're slower than you used to be. V." Victor Hale had seen everything. He was using the internet as his battlefield, and he was telling Michael the game was already in motion. Michael felt the air thin around him, the city noise fading into a dull hum as memories of Victor resurfaced. Cold, precise, brilliant, the only recruit who ever matched Michael's instincts, until power, ambition, and cruelty twisted him into something darker. This wasn't random. This was personal. Victor was attacking Michael's life piece by piece, and the viral attention was only amplifying the danger, giving Victor 1,000 new angles to exploit. As Michael pushed through the crowd and reached a quieter block, a loud chime rang from a nearby electronics store. Screens in the window shifted to breaking news, his own face filling all 12 TVs at once. "The Guardian resurfaces," the headline blared, followed by Isabella's name, Lane Industries, and blurred images of Sophie. Reporters were already speculating about the family connection, replaying old footage of Isabella's father's former security team with circles and arrows pointing to Michael, insisting he was the same man. The truth was becoming unavoidable. Isabella called him, her voice shaking between anger and fear as she said, "They've linked you. The media is running full stories." Sophie saw the news. She's terrified. Emily's school called. "Paparazzi are trying to get in." "Michael, you need to come home now!" Michael froze. Emily's school, paparazzi, cameras, his daughter, his world being dragged into this storm. His pulse thundered in his ears as he imagined strangers approaching her, shouting questions, flashing cameras, recording her fear. It ignited something primal inside him, something fierce and unbreakable, the same fire that made him face bullets years ago without blinking. "I'm coming," he said, his voice low and deadly calm. Keep Emily inside. Don't let anyone near her. Lock the doors. He hung up and started running, not walking, not pacing, running through streets as if the ground were on fire. His mind raced with every possibility Victor could exploit. If Victor wanted to hurt him, going after Emily was the fastest way. Michael's vision sharpened, every instinct tuned to the highest alert. He crossed intersections, dodged crowds, weaving through traffic like a predator on the hunt. When he finally reached his apartment building, chaos had already erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, neighbors peeking from their windows. Michael pushed through them with controlled force, ignoring the barrage of questions. Upstairs, the moment he burst through the door, Emily ran into his arms, trembling, confused, frightened by the noise outside. Michael held her tightly, lifting her off the ground, pressing his cheek against her hair, silently promising her with everything inside him that nothing would touch her. Isabella stood nearby, pale and stressed, holding her phone with shaking hands as she said, Victor wanted this. He turned the world against you. He exposed everything. Michael looked out the window where drones hovered, where a dozen cameras pointed at his home, where strangers analyzed his life like entertainment. His eyes hardened, not with fear, but with purpose. Then we expose him back, he said quietly, setting Emily gently on the couch, kissing her forehead. He wants a war. He just got one. The apartment felt like a war room, every second thick with tension as Michael watched. Emily clutched her stuffed rabbit on the couch, her eyes still red from crying, while Isabella paced with her phone, trying to contact her security teams, though deep down they both knew this. Battle was beyond corporate protection. This was personal. This was history coming for them. Michael stood near the window, shoulders tense, scanning the swarm of reporters and drones outside, the flashing lights reflecting in his eyes like the ghosts of his past, and he felt the weight of every choice he had made. Leaving the agency, hiding from the world, building a quiet life for Emily, believing he could outrun a man like Victor Hale. But now, seeing Emily frightened, seeing how Victor used the media to invade his home, his peace, his fatherhood, something inside him snapped back into place, something cold, disciplined, unstoppable. Isabella approached him, trembling but determined, saying, We can fight this legally. We can release a public statement. We can try to control the narrative. But Michael shook his head, his voice low and steady. Victor doesn't care about statements. He doesn't care about truth. He wants me, and he wants to break me through the people I love. Emily looked up, sensing the shift in the room, and in her small voice she asked, Dad, are we in danger? Michael knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently, and said with a soft strength, Not as long as I'm here. I promise you. That promise wasn't a comfort. It was a vow. He stood and grabbed the broken pen from the table, the same pen he carried from his old life, the one that had cracked during a mission with Victor years ago when Victor had saved his life once, before the darkness took him. The memories surged, Victor's brilliance, his ambition, the mission that turned him bitter, the betrayal that forced Michael to disappear. Victor envied Michael's natural leadership, envied the loyalty he earned, envied the respect he never asked for. And now Victor had found the perfect battlefield, public chaos, viral attention, emotional warfare. But if Victor wanted to finish what he started, Michael was done running. The room suddenly vibrated with a sharp buzz. Isabella's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was a location pin, then a photo, a screen capture from one of the drones outside their building, but zoomed into Emily's school, showing Victor's men in the background earlier that day. Michael's stomach tightened like steel. Victor wasn't threatening anymore. He was already acting. Beneath the image was a message that echoed like poison. Bring the truth into the light or I'll do it my way. 1 hour, come alone. Fee, Isabella gasped, covering her mouth, while Michael stared at the message with chilling calm. He looked at Emily again, his anchor, his world, and he knew there was no universe in which he would allow Victor to touch her. Without hesitation, he grabbed his jacket, checked the door locks, and told Isabella, Stay with Emily. Don't open the door for anyone. Not police, not press, not neighbors. No one. Isabella, normally composed and unshakable, grabbed his arm, eyes glistening. Michael, if you go, you may not come back. He gave her a faint, sad smile, the kind of smile a man gives when he has already accepted his fate long before the moment arrives. I stopped running a long time ago, he whispered, then stepped into the hallway, shutting the door softly behind him. The city outside was loud, chaotic, suffocating with flashing cameras and shouted questions, but Michael moved through it with ghost-like precision, hood up, head down, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow returning to the place it belonged. He reached the location, Victor sent, a deserted rooftop parking deck overlooking the city, the wind slicing through the air like blades. Victor stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, wearing a calm, cruel smile that sent a chill through the air. "You took your time," Victor said. "I was starting to think fatherhood made you soft." Michael said nothing, stepping closer, his voice steady. "You crossed a line." Victor laughed lightly, tilting his head. "Lines are for men who fear consequences. You and we've always been more alike than you admit." Michael's fists tightened. "I protect people. You use them." Victor shrugged. "Protection, control, it's all the same currency. You abandoned your skills. You wasted your talent on a quiet life, and I'm here to take back the legacy you threw away." But Michael's voice cut through him like a blade. "Legacy isn't power. It's who you choose to stand for." Victor's smile faded, replaced with something darker, a wounded ego hungry for dominance. "Then stand for something now," he said, pulling a gun and aiming it at Michael's chest. But Michael expected it. The moment Victor moved, Michael surged forward with years of instinct igniting at once. They clashed violently, two forces forged from the same fire but shaped by different choices. Michael disarmed him, sending the gun skidding across the pavement, and slammed Victor back with a strength fueled not by training but by fatherhood, by love, by purpose. Victor stumbled, gasping, defeated not just physically but by the realization that Michael's power came from something he never understood: heart. "This isn't over," Victor growled, but Michael stepped back, breathing hard, replying quietly, "It is for you." Police sirens echoed in the distance. Isabella had traced the message and sent help. As officers closed in, Victor merely glared at Michael in bitter respect, whispering, "You win." This time, Michael didn't look at him again. He simply walked away, leaving the past in handcuffs behind him. When he returned home, Emily ran into his arms, relief flooding her face. He held her tighter than ever, realizing that his greatest victory wasn't survival, it was protecting her innocence, her world. Isabella exhaled in relief, tears in her eyes, whispering, "It's over." And as Michael closed the door, shutting out the noise, the cameras, the chaos, he looked around his apartment, the place he fought so hard to keep safe, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The story of Michael, the guardian, ended not with glory, not with fame, not with power, but with a father holding his daughter, knowing he had finally defeated the only enemy who ever truly threatened his life, his past. The end.